I really enjoyed generative stuff and like algorithmic music, and I think that's really interesting.
Mhm.
And I thought it would be fun to do some kind of like VR album where it's like a VR environment and every level is like the song, so to speak, but it's
Hmm.
not because I mean that is music in like the traditional sense is it's very much linear. It starts and it ends, and there's stuff that happens in the middle, and it happens the same way every time. And especially in recorded music, like if an artist released an album, that's it. They don't update it later on. It's not
Hmm.
like you get
Mhm.
album version whatever, which is something Ben Jordan is experimenting with right now. I know, and I thought that was an interesting idea. But I thought it would be interesting to do like a VR thing that's a at least semi-generative experience where the way you interact in that environment, like you lift the square and suddenly there's more chords, and if you push the bubbles away from you every time the bubble bounces, that's a melodic note that's tuned to the chord, something like that. So each level is the song, but it only exists as long as you're in it, and it only exists in the way that you make it exist. Because I really love the idea of like impermanence. I think that's such a
Hmm.
fascinating concept, especially when it comes to like art, where the whole thing in Buddhism, the sand gardens and whatever. And I think that's so interesting to do that, or the mandalas or whatever, where they do these crazy sand paintings and then just wipe it off.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's and I get that that's an exercise in like humility and like appreciation, but I think it's an interesting idea with music too. And I wonder if there's a better way to explore that, where it's like
Hmm.
there are these components that represent a thing, but they only represent them if you make them do that. And I thought that that would
Tell me
just be
more
a
about that.
really interesting take on an album. How you would do that, I don't exactly know, but I feel like
Hmm.
that would be a cool idea.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I've never heard anybody talking about that before, and I am so very interested in that. That's one of the things that I have now released 2 songs, right? Nothing like, like a lot of folks be putting out albums and all
Yeah.
this. Like I have not had that kind of capacity. But the 2 songs that I've put out, I'm very proud of. And the first one is like, that it took like 11 years to make that joint, and
Right.
there's like all the stuff, and it like took everything that I could do, and all this money and all this, right? And then now you put it on and it lasts for 4 minutes,
Yep.
and then it's done. And
And we've reached
like,
like a weird peak in music with that too, where, and kind of like you said though, every song you make though, it takes as long as you've been making music. There was a thing with, I think it was like,
mm,
maybe it was Van Gogh or Picasso or something. I remember reading it in a book where it was a story of, there's a famous artist at a cafe. I think it was Van Gogh or Picasso. I don't really remember offhand, but they're sketching on a napkin, and this lady walks up and says, "I want that napkin from you. What can I pay you for it?" And he says, "It's priceless." And she says, "Well, it only took you 5 minutes to draw before you were just going to throw it away." And he said, "No, it took me 60 years to draw this
mm-hmm,
picture."
mm-hmm,
And I
mm-hmm,
think that's a lot of it. And it's funny because as artists, we work so hard to actualize these ideas and concepts. And yeah, we spend all this time and money and blood, sweat, and tears to make 4 minutes of something or whatever, for
mm-hmm.
it to be swiped by in like a Spotify playlist while someone's taking a dump at a Wendy's.
For sure.
And it's funny that that's where music exists anymore, because it's like it's hard to appreciate that as an artist, because it's like I remember, as a kid, as a teenager and whatever, putting on an album, putting on headphones, and like that was the world. That was all I would experience in that moment, was the album start to finish, listening to like every detail. And then, I would see my sister or my stepbrother or whoever, like they'd be putting on music, like cleaning their room and whatever. And it's like, you're not like experiencing it though, but it's like, that is the way most people experience music, which is kind of funny, which is why I thought that like that VR thing might be an interesting twist on it, just because it's like,
Mm,
it's equally passive as it is active. And I think that's an interesting like intersect in the idea of like what music represents. Is it an activity? Is it something you consciously, you know, take part in?
mm,
And,
mm-hmm.
I don't know, maybe that would
That's
just be an interesting experiment.
For sure. Oh yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. That's super super interesting because the second piece that I made is also a breath exercise. So you can just put it on and listen to the music, and I think that the music is dope, but it's also a breathwork exercise. So it's got a use case. You can put it on and
Hmm.
interact with the music, and part of the reason why I did that was because I was like you, where I get a little bit offended sometimes when people aren't listening to the music or when people aren't paying attention, and not just my records, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
the shit that I love, and people are like clearly just not, they're scrolling on their phone or
Well,
like
it's like when
whatever
you
it
go to
is.
a bar and there's like a musician on stage, pouring their heart out, playing the
Mhm.
songs, playing the covers, and then they're like, and here's my original tune, and everybody just completely tunes out. And it's like, this
Totally.
sucks.
Right, right. Yeah, and so I regularly get offended by that. And so I made a piece of music that incorporates like your attention into it. So it's like
Mhm.
this idea of like pay it just, and the idea of the whole thing is to be still for a little while, for about 20 minutes. You just like hang out and breathe and be easy and all this, right? And so that gives you an opportunity to listen to the music. And so it's interesting to hear you talking about your VR generated music thing here as well, because it's so similar to that. And I hadn't planned to go down that route. But where that sort of like leads me to here is, so we're in this place where you're, like scrolling in the Wendy's bathroom or whatever. And so, and everybody out here has made so much more music that's way doper than whatever you made, and that is way better promoted, and the album artwork is cooler, and it's been distributed more effectively, et cetera, et cetera. So now, as people who are, I don't know, independent creators, or people who are just kind of like regular people who are trying to make the world more beautiful and more valuable in our regular lives, how can we think about value and what our own arts and creation have, like what value those things have, as well as like those concepts kind of generally?